Oh, I had my chance to leave.
No. Oh. One. Okay, we are live. Hello, everybody. So we're going to get things kicked off here. We're about a minute behind because my computer is about 4 minutes behind. So I got a little mixed up, but welcome. I'm Amy from Cultivator. So as we've been saying, I'm part of the team behind the dream here at Sask Startup Summit over the next 2 days. And welcome to the Future Founders Panel. So this discussion has truly been designed to help inspire the future of SK Tech and the next generation of founders. There truly has never been a better place to start a tech company than right here in this province. So with that, I'm happy to introduce some of the individuals who have helped pave the way for SK Tech. First, we have Aaron Genest, who is the president of SaskTech. He will be our moderator today of the panel with Kirk Morrison, co-founder and CEO of Krugo app, Kyle Folk, founder of IntraGrain, Katrina German, founder and CEO of Ethical Digital, and Rachel Drew, founder and CEO of Cadence. So throughout, please drop any questions that you have in the chat. They will be answering these questions throughout. So make sure as soon as you have one, you drop it in there and we will make sure that they get them. And with that, without further ado, I will toss the mic over to Aaron to get things kicked off today.
Good afternoon. Glad to be here with this excellent panel of founders. This is supposed to inspire people to get involved in entrepreneurship, to start that company and to get going and join one of the greatest communities in the country for entrepreneurship. The challenge being, of course, that you might think that this particular time, regardless of it being an awesome place to start a company, might not be the best time to start a company. So we've tried to gather a group of founders who represent a variety of different domains and a variety of different experiences over the last several years. People who have seen the ecosystem when it was quite nascent, and we had as many companies in tech as you could count on 2 hands and maybe 1 foot. And also people who have more recently joined as part of the first generation of ag tech companies to have successful exit. And we're looking at Kyle here, but also people who have recently founded companies and are going through the process of trying to be nimble in an environment that requires nimbleness. So I will get through, I will ask each one of our panelists to take just maybe 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes and introduce yourselves in the context of what you're doing now and maybe your experience that might be pertinent for the audience. We will start with you, Katrina, since your mic is unmuted. Congratulations.
Perfect. Yeah, that's how I like to sneak in there. So I'm Katrina German. I'm the CEO of ethicaldigital.ca. And basically, we have the small goal of wanting to change the trajectory of the internet. So just a little tiny thing that we're trying to accomplish. So we're doing that through our digital strategy, which is where our company started, email strategy, website conversions, email, social media. And we've actually expanded and we're moving more into research and what I call big actions. So we have a few different topics we're tackling. How do we get more Indigenous women involved in technology? How do we get more women involved in venture capital, which funds the internet? And also, how does social media affecting humans' well-being? So those are some of the projects that we've got underway already. As you can probably guess, I'm a bit of a social impact entrepreneur, but I have been around the tech scene for several years now. I had a tech company before that worked with change organizations around the world to basically share their stories and use a video platform. So I've kind of had the experience of growing a company. That one didn't go as far as I would like. And, I had some time where I was doing some consulting and such. And now I'm really focused on, building again, especially in this environment. So I'm really excited to be here and thanks for having me.
Thank you. Let's move on to Kirk.
My name is Kirk Morrison, co-founder of a company called Krugo. We started in 2017 is when we got going. So we were one of the first companies actually part of the Cultivator. So it's been really cool to see from the time when we started, and there was a couple tables and some chairs laying around at the university to where we are now. We build technology in the travel and live entertainment space. So that's been a bit of an adventure over the last 18 months or so. Has kind of challenged us, but we've been really fortunate to have kind of been sheltered in this awesome ecosystem here in Saskatchewan. Really looking forward to lots of opportunities on the horizon with the return of travel, hopefully in the near-ish future. So yeah, really excited to have a team of about 10 based in Regina. Yeah, really excited about the travel space and optimistic for the future.
All right, thank you, Kirk. And I'm noticing that this is the K panel. So we'll go to our third K, Kyle.
Thanks. Yeah, Kyle Folk. I am the founder of IntraGrain. I'll back up a little bit further to start my story. I was born and raised in a small town, Saskatchewan, called Holdfast. A population of 100 to 150 people at the most. So very small, parents, grain farming family. So grew up exposed to the agriculture world. And then when I finished high school, I ended up going and getting my electrical trade. So I'm an electrician by trade, actually, which is something that some people find pretty interesting, in that I had a successful tech company that I exited from, but I'm an electrician. So I myself cannot build the tech required that was integral in the success of our company. And so in 2011, I started a company called IntraGrain, and then grew that. It's a grain storage monitoring company we designed from scratch. And I grew that and was acquired in 2018 by Calian Group out of Ottawa, Ontario. They have offices in Saskatoon as well. And I stuck around there for 2 years, fulfilled my obligations. And then since November of last year, I've been exploring with eyes wide open on what's next.
Very cool. For those of you in the bleachers, you might know Calian as, or rather SED as part of the Calian family. It's the granddaddy of engineering firms here in Saskatoon. Let's move on to Rachel.
Well, now I feel like I don't fit in with all the Ks. I don't know, Aaron. Where do we?
I got your back.
Okay, good. Well, anyway, so I am one of the founders of Cadence. So for me, what happened with Cadence is I had gone through a loss after my mom had died and dealt with the administrative process after that. And after struggling through that for about a year, I just realized how fundamental of a problem it is. And so that's what Cadence is here to fix. We're really here to support people through the administration process after the death of a loved one. Prior to that, I guess just with a little background on me, I kind of, much like Kyle had mentioned, I had an interesting background. I actually worked in occupational health and safety and owned a business in that. So this is my second business venture and is much different. I too am not a technical person either. So I'm not building the software. Thankfully, I have wonderful people who can do that with me. And they're much better at it than I am. So yeah, that's me.
Great, thank you very much, everyone. It's fantastic to see so many non-tech founders of tech companies. We need a lot of that. There are more non-tech people in the world than there are tech people, and there's no reason that you can have a non-tech that you can't have a non-tech founder, rather. Lastly, I guess I should take a minute. I'm Aaron Genet. I am a middle management cog in the giant machine that is Siemens AG. Which happens to have a branch of it that is the largest software company in the world, Siemens Digital Industries Software. I come by it honestly, though. I was a member of a small startup called Solido Design Automation in Saskatoon. We build software for the semiconductor industry that nobody understands, and least of all the people who use it. And in my evening hours, I moonlight as the Siemens representative to SaskTech, which puts me as the board chair. SaskTech is an advisory organization to government post-secondary institutions and the K-12 stakeholders on labor and ecosystem issues. So very boring government affairs kinds of stuff, but I get to meet a lot of interesting people and have fascinating conversations. This is going to be, I am sure, one of them. So let's leap right into those questions. But before we do, actually, so I'm lying already, you can expect that of anybody involved in government. Before we do, I would like to encourage you, if you are in the audience and would like to ask a question, not to hold that question to the end, but to stick it in the chat so the moderators can grab it and throw it to us, we will happily blather on until the end of this session, unless you are asking some questions, in which case we'll try and incorporate it in the discourse and respond to it. So beginning perhaps with Katrina, since you actually, I think, founded a company in the middle of this mess, can you please tell me kind of, in the last little while, as a pandemic broke out and you thought this is an ideal time for me to launch yet another entrepreneurial attempt. Okay, are you crazy?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. What was your thought process in getting here?
Well, it was an interesting time because we've been doing digital strategy for a little while. And when COVID first hit, I'd basically kind of grown the team to about 4 people. We had a very ambitious, let's go, we're going to grow large. And when COVID hit, all of our leads dried up. We lost about 1/3 of our clients, and I had to lay off some people. So we were down to 2 people. And I was, looking at this, and 2 of us kind of held the ship, for a few months, but then things started to get busy, very, very busy. And so we ended up starting to expand. So we actually we're at 12 people now. So we've gone from 2 people to 12 people over the pandemic. And are continuing to grow as well. And so in the meantime, it was right around December prior to that too, I'd been talking about this for a long time, just some of the issues that were happening online. And I got kind of worried, we're doing digital strategy. And I was like, are we the next tobacco company? We're putting stuff out there, all the stuff that was happening with Trump, all the stuff was happening with masks versus anti-masks. And online was a very volatile space. It still is a bit intense, but at that point, things were kind of feeling like they were peaking. And I was just like, I've got to do something about this. We have to look at this in a different way. And so I talked to my team as we were growing, and I was like, listen, do you mind taking a different direction? So yeah, we launched Ethical Digital in January of this year. And, we've been able to get a lot of research dollars and really cool projects underway already. And it's been very exciting. And I can't wait to see what's going to happen over the next few years. So yes, it was crazy but I also think, in any sort of change, there's opportunity, right? And so if you're looking at, there's going to be there's some businesses have been hit terribly hard during this. And it's just, they were on the wrong side of the dice roll, essentially. And it sucks. I've been there in a situation where businesses are, going under and having a tough time. But, in the digital sphere, that was growing. Everybody was starting to understand, whoa, I've been thinking about getting on digital for several years. Now I actually need to get serious about it. So it was actually, we were on the right side of the dice roll, I guess, when that happened. And so we were able to grow. And so, yeah, it's a bit of an intense time. This is a time where, entrepreneurs, entrepreneurship's always hard. It's always intense. You're solving problems constantly. But in the past, I would say, in a weird way, you kind of had an idea of how things were going to go in the future. You're like, hey, I can predict and I can make decisions sort of on how things were going to go. And right now you're kind of in this blind spot where you're like, I have this information right now. I just got to go with it. And so, yeah, it's crazy. It's a totally different environment. It's really topsy-turvy. And I hugs to all my entrepreneur people out there too, because this is an intense time, but it's I would also say there's always opportunity in times of change. And so this is actually probably the right time, especially in technology. I don't think this is going away anytime soon, the COVID environment. People are going to be relying on technology more and more. And this is the time to come in and solve problems and use technology as the tool to do so.
Cool. I admire your optimism, and I imagine that there were moments where Kirk could have used some of that optimism in the last 18 months as he watched thing after thing close down. That was the foundation for what he was selling to. Kirk, can you tell us about that journey? Then you decided, well, heck, why don't we go into the entertainment business ourselves and launched a festival? Are you crazy?
Oh yeah, for sure. So for us, we launched our initial product in the fall of 2018. It was very much like a rough around the edges, minimum viable product, and we continued to build the team, continued to collect feedback, and work towards a better product. We were feeling pretty good about where we were starting to get to, and then the pandemic hit. So what started out as us thinking that things were going to be a little slow for a month or two ended up being kind of 18 months and to where we are today. So, it was for sure challenging in that we felt like we were just starting to get to a point where we might hit our stride. But it also gave us an opportunity to kind of reflect on things. If you're feeling bad for the travel sector, I feel bad for someone who owns a hotel and had empty hotel rooms for 18 months. We had an opportunity to use that time to think about what we were going to be able to do in the future and kind of reevaluate. And we're pretty optimistic kind of coming out of things that there's going to be new opportunities on the table. And I think what Krugo is coming out of the pandemic is actually going to be quite a bit different than what we started with. So in a way, it was a bit of an opportunity, a bit of a chance to reset. Certainly it had its challenges in terms of keeping the bills paid and figuring some things out. We did launch a music festival that was built for COVID. So that was completely new to us. We had a bunch of software developers trying to run a music festival. It ended up working out. We had a bunch of fun with it. And we were able to support the industry that our company was built around. So the folks that generally run the events that we had historically kind of promoted through Krugo, they weren't able to do that. And it felt pretty good to be able to use our entrepreneurial spirit, rally the team, and build something that got some of those people back to work. So it was a crazy experience. I think we're out of the live entertainment game now. It was a good moment in time, moment in history, onto bigger and better things, I think. But we're here on the other side of the valley and excited for the future.
I'm interested to hear that you said that you kind of carried your customers or went through the journey of the struggle with your customers. I've heard the same story from other tech companies that relied on the sector. 7Shifts is a really good example, where they just doubled down on their customer relationships and realized the revenue was going to take a hit, but coming out the other side, they would have a much stronger relationship with their customers. So it's an interesting strategy, and certainly a good thing to take away out of it for the future, regardless of pandemic, that customer relationship is paramount. Rachel, I want to assure you that the past kind of 2 years of working in technology found as a tech company startup is not normal. It gets better. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you experienced and where. Maybe I'm interested in, where did you find that you'd had to approach things differently than you'd assumed you had to as a result of the different times that we were going through?
Yeah, for sure. It's been wild. That's for sure. I do think every entrepreneur is a little bit crazy, probably, because it is a wild ride. There is no doubt about that. So for us, we launched in March of last year, started building the product, I should say. So
excellent timing.
Yeah, I know, it was perfect. Right when the pandemic hit, we were just in there. So what had happened is I was in the co-launch program from January until March, and that was really evaluating, what I was going to do and whether it was worth doing. It was just an idea at that time. So just pre-pandemic, it was an idea and I was evaluating it. And then all of a sudden the pandemic hits. And for me, it was kind of interesting, similar to what Katrina had said, is some things, unfortunately, the dice didn't roll their direction. And so it didn't always work out for certain businesses. But with something like this, in a little bit of a slow, stagnant industry, dealing with, government funeral homes, different things like that are sometimes averse to change, specifically funeral homes can have a little bit of challenge. It really opened up the door to technology to solve these problems when, people were advised to stay at home and we're not supposed to, Service Canada was closed and you can't deal with all of the things in the same way that you once could. And so for us, we were really, really fortunate in the way that it actually accelerated what we're doing. It opened up the eyes of the partners that we have and that we want to have in the funeral industry and in various industries to show that there are other options and people, don't have to go in person to deal with all of these different things. So it was really strange timing to start the business, but I actually feel like it was probably the best possible time to start the business when we're trying to change a process that has stayed the same for so long and really hasn't had a whole lot of innovation. More innovation is coming to the space now, which is awesome. But there really hasn't been a lot of technology in this space, what you might call death tech or something. Now it's becoming a trendy word. But,
That's awful. I I just like, that's
awful.
terrible.
It is awful. Yeah.
Necrotech.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Maybe not the popular term, that's for sure. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride, but we've, had a good opportunity to grow our team, and thankfully, the ecosystem here is amazing. And I can say with full confidence that, if it wasn't for the collabs program, I probably never would have started, because I'm not technical. I don't have a technical background. I had an idea of a problem that I was dedicated to solving, and that was all that I had. And, collabs taught me that that's enough. That's enough to pursue what you need to pursue and to do what you need to do. You can get the help you need in the other areas. You don't have to be an expert in all of the things. You just have to be passionate enough to solve that problem.
Here you are giving phenomenal founders advice just 18 months in. So well done on that. But I would like to censure you for your use of collabs. This is a cultivator event, and I'm sorry we won't be able to speak for as long next time.
To also say founders table, founders table.
Oh yes, founders table, so good. Yeah, no,
that's the West founders table. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And you know what? If I was in Regina, I would hope to be involved in cultivator too. So it is the office is a little bit nicer than ours, just a little bit.
The community is actually what really counts, and I really value that we have a pan Saskatchewan community. We're too small a province to go it in little cities and units. We have to think at least province wide, if not prairies wide, to be able to do anything significant. So I'm thrilled at the way we all managed to work together this way. I do want to pull out from that a really interesting take, which is that some businesses actually do better from being able to move slowly. And that's not something I'd I thought about, but I had a really interesting conversation with AndGo last week or the week before. Eric Fredrickson, the CTO there, was telling me that the only reason that he thinks they have a competitive advantage is that they have the pure determination to walk through the reams of paperwork necessary to work in the health industry, and that it just takes time and a sharp pencil, and that's how you get there. And so, working with government procurement processes, working with industries that are unfamiliar with digitization, certainly slower might be an advantage there. Let the rest of the world slow down for you to catch up. And this was an opportunity for several different sectors, including retail and restaurants, to jump ahead in digital adoption, something we wouldn't have seen 5 years ago. So, Kyle, I want to ask you, and this is kind of a strange question. I'm going to characterize you as looking for the next job. What struck you about the founder journey and entrepreneurship, and what would limit you or interest you in entering into that again during a pandemic?
Yeah, good question. I always have to look at things through the agriculture lens. That's what I know. And from a pandemic perspective with agriculture, it's not that it wasn't affected, it was affected differently. If I look at the farmers, the way they operate, they generally, their office is in the middle of, nowhere at times. It's on a farm where nobody's around. And so the pandemic stuff that, we all associate with, the social distancing and, all those kinds of things, farming is a social distant occupation. Really, it has been forever. So maybe they were ahead of the curve on that. But the problems didn't come there. The problems for being a company that sells into agriculture came from the other angles that were the tailspin from the pandemic of things like supply chain issues, especially if you're into hardware and those kinds of things. And so from a procurement standpoint, your risk assessment, your inventory strategies all had to really adjust really quickly to make sure that you wouldn't miss out on potential revenue, because farmers are feeding the world and everybody still has to eat. So that engine's still going to keep going forward regardless of what the situation is. You just want to make sure that you're able to take advantage of that, just in time or in whatever manner you work in. So, getting into something in agriculture in a pandemic, I wouldn't be afraid of it at all. I just from a standpoint of being prepared and how you'd have to be ready to attack that market would be a little different than how I did it back in 2011.
Can you characterize that operationally just a little bit? I want to get to Kirk in a second because he said something about we reset, and that implies kind of a pivot maybe or an operational change necessary to be able to manage that. I'm a big operations person. I think that fundamentally, once you get past that initial TRL where you can actually put a product in front of people, at that point it's just operations. It's just how do we put the people in the positions rapidly enough, get them trained, and fill our funnel, because now we should go to market as rapidly as possible, and that's just kind of logistics and operations. So what would you think is different in a gross characterization now if you were to get into ag tech today as opposed to ag tech 24 months ago?
I think it's the lead times is the biggest one that strikes me. And honestly, I mean, the lead times that you have to be prepared for now versus what it was before. I can't remember if it was Rachel or Katrina that said before, before the pandemic, things were somewhat, you could predict and you could somewhat have a good guess at how things were going to unfold. I mean, honestly, Aaron, being in electronics world or knowing a little bit about it, before I can make an assessment that, if I'm going to build something and I need to order some raw materials, that's a 4 to 6 week lead time. Now we're starting to see that 4 to 6 week lead time that was standard before. And if it was 6 weeks, you'd be upset, right? You're like, come on, 6 weeks? Who operates this way? But now that 6 weeks can be 24 weeks, and that's damaging, especially from an agriculture perspective where you work in such a seasonality. So if you miss the window of opportunity, you have a whole year to wait. And you cannot risk that from an operations standpoint. So now your efficiencies need to be that more in tune with the outside factors that, before you could kind of get away with, if I got to delay 4 weeks, we can get around that. That doesn't happen anymore. And so you really need to be planning a long time ahead, which is tough because now, your inventory, if you wanted to do, 3-4 turns of inventory a year, you need to reassess.
Right. It becomes move slowly and don't break things. Yeah. Kirk, what did you do? What changed?
Everything changed. I think for just thinking of the differences of where we're going now, I think we, in reflecting about what we as a company do best during the pandemic, we realized that our core competency is not in mass user acquisition. It's not in building that funnel. Our specialty and expertise is in products. So we found, and I kind of mentioned our strategy is changing. Where we're going to kind of position ourselves is figuring out how we build partnerships to kind of connect our product in a licensing or a kind of white label partnership type of environment. And we're seeing really good success in that through the pandemic, doing stuff like the music festival, which was completely unrelated to the software that we build. It gave us some relevance. It put our brand out there. We were doing something unique at a time when, that type of thing wasn't happening. And that gave us exposure. And we've actually maintained and developed new relationships with companies in Canada and in the US as a result of that exposure. So it's the time that we've been able to take to reflect on what it is that we do best and what it is that we have to offer, and then also some strange things that we did to stay relevant instead of just kind of turning off the lights and then trying to show up 18 months later. It was like, what can we do to continue to build partnerships, to continue to try to unravel what travel and live entertainment is going to look like post pandemic, and we're still figuring that out, but it's been an interesting journey.
Okay, that's I can't imagine what you went through. I mean, this was happening to me while I was in the security of a big multinational that also was seeing an increase in demand. I mean, everybody needed computer chips, so I was about as safe as can be. So I'm in awe, frankly, of the gymnastics that you folks have done. Rachel, you talked about the importance of the co-launch program and the infrastructure around that gave you a start, particularly being a non-tech founder trying to go into a tech field. Can you talk a little bit about the infrastructure available to you, and like what aspects of that have you seized on? We've put a lot of things in place in the last few years. I mean, there are the incubators, which you touched on. We've got accelerators in the province now. We've got Foresight Clean Tech and a few others. We've got new venture capital instruments that didn't exist, both in ag tech, but also generally in tech at different levels, at seed and angel. And we've got new training programs available. We've got, kind of a larger community of people to pull from. And we've got people who have now exited who can provide some expertise. What were the elements that you found the most valuable? And maybe what would you like to be pulling from more that you're not?
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak on that. So I honestly feel like we have utilized so many of the resources and the education around what those resources are. There's been lots of, presentations and conferences and things to educate people. And so I think that's been done really well. In Saskatchewan, as you can actually find the resources that you can access. So I know WESC has been an absolutely wonderful help too, in addition to collabs. Katrina has facilitated a lot of those too, which has been so wonderful. So Katrina has been such an amazing mentor to me, and so many other people in the ecosystem. So this includes other entrepreneurs who I've had the pleasure to get to know and work with and speak with. And then also the investment community. They have offered so much wonderful mentorship that is absolutely invaluable to me. The STSI tax credit is another really wonderful one that encourages people to invest in early stage startups with the 45% tax credit, which we have utilized. So yeah, that has been a really, really awesome program. We have also been fortunate enough to get staff training through a couple different programs and support to work with youth, lots of research grants as well. I think Katrina, I know you can probably speak a lot to the research grants also. But yeah, honestly, I feel like the ecosystem here and the support that companies can get, it's meant to help companies and to help them grow and to help them scale. And so as long as you look for it, look for the resources, network, talk to your community, whether it's through the Women Entrepreneurs Association or, any of the, cultivator collabs, anything like that, just make those connections because everything you need is there. It's just a matter of finding it and figuring out how to get it. So I don't really feel like we've been lacking, honestly, because we've had such wonderful mentorship, coaching, government supports, that I feel that is going to be fundamental in us having the ability to continue to grow and scale.
Cool. That's great. I'm thrilled to hear that. But really, I was hoping for some constructive criticism so we could do better. But okay, we'll take that one. Katrina, what's been different from one story to ethical digital? There's a gap there of well, no, I won't say how long. There was a gap. We've both lived through this gap. Yeah. But maybe you'd like to tell me a little bit about where what the feeling is like and how that's shaped the way that you've approached entrepreneurship this time.
Well, I think it's really interesting because when you were doing the original opening, you were saying that you could count people on fingers and toes kind of thing, and so I've been lucky. A lot of the OGs of the tech scene, we were in there and part of that crew, and it was an interesting time at that time. We didn't have collabs, we didn't have cultivator, we didn't have any of those supports, so I often had to travel to find the people that I needed to. It was a pretty reasonably tight-knit group too, because there was really only like 10 companies at that point. Everybody knew each other, and if you needed a hand, like I remember calling Brendan from Vendasta and being like, they just asked me to come pitch in Boston. I have no idea what to do. And he's just like, here's my pitch deck, and so it was kind of a, just a different time, and there just were not that many supports. However, it was a little less competitive. Like I know right now, it's a bit more challenging to get IRAP support, things like that. And at that time, it was kind of like, they were looking for you to give you money. And at this point, there's a lot of people who are competing for those funds. And so it's a little bit more competitive. So it's a totally different landscape, no question. And I feel like there's definitely supports there. I also feel like the entire Canadian market has matured as well over this time. So as we've been growing in Saskatchewan quite rapidly and doing very well in terms of our and I do believe this is actually, government support and people really, the community really trying to grow, that it's really helped Saskatchewan grow quite quickly. Like I know that stat that we're the second fastest growing tech sector next to Waterloo. I love that one. And, but, the Canadians, the area has grown as well. So in the past, like I would travel and go and, pitch in Alberta, pitch in BC, pitch all over the place, New York, San Francisco, all that kind of stuff. And now that's even competitive too. At that time, they were just so excited to have, some, fresh companies in the place, but now it's a lot more competitive of a process. So I would say that's probably the biggest difference is there's more of a community. There's a lot more support. There's a lot more advice. There's a lot more funding out there, but it's a lot more competitive to access those things.
Sure. I guess you take the good with the bad, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the good news is probably the market is bigger too.
Yes.
So we can aim for that. Kyle, I might be misconstruing this, but in some senses, and maybe it's because of the late entrance of ag tech VC funds, but I feel like ag tech is just starting to get really rolling here in the province. And that when you started into it, it would have been pretty sparse compared to where it is now. In particular, around capital investment, it feels like that there's more education now for VCs about the opportunities and risks inherent in ag tech funding, which is an exercise that we were going through in tech in general, or at least starting 7 or 8 years ago, and are still struggling with a great deal. It's a difficult sector to educate investors in. How do you feel about the maturity and trajectory of the ag tech sector relative to what you've been seeing in the rest of the tech sector?
Yeah, I would agree with your comments, Aaron. I think, in 2011, I don't think ag tech was even a term that was, nobody said ag tech. It wasn't a thing. There was like 2 of us. I shouldn't say that. There were big players, right? From an entrepreneur standpoint, I mean, Regina is a staple for the likes of Brandts and the Redheads and, the Dagelmans. I mean, these are massively successful companies that are entrepreneurs at the root of what they've started. But it's changed abundantly, and my opinion on it is it's about time. Agriculture should have been getting this kind of recognition for a long time. And so, I mean, fundamentally, I even think, this is a little bit off course here, but I think back to when I was in high school and you have career class and you start looking at like, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? And I'm surrounded by everybody else in my class comes from farming backgrounds. But was entrepreneur a word that carried like a good connotation? Not at all. Yet we all were, offspring of entrepreneurs. And it was never even discussed at that level. And it wasn't like, it was almost looked at negatively, right? Like that if you're an entrepreneur, you're just trying to make something happen, like the guy who tried to come sell me snake oil last week. And it's like, that's not at all what this is. And agriculture is the root of entrepreneurs. So for me, it's been a long time coming. And I'm really excited to see all the capital that is available and all the tools and the funding and the opportunities and just purely the attention that it's getting that it deserves. I mean, there's not many industries in the world that touch everybody every day multiple times. And, farming is an industry that does that. And farmers have been notorious for inventing things since the beginning of time. And so this isn't new when you break down the barriers of agriculture. It just is getting the attention it deserves, in my opinion.
What would you put in place that isn't in place right now from point of view of ag tech or from the tech community, whichever?
Yeah, it's not specific to the ag community, I don't think, but what I put in, I think, and it's starting a little bit, Aaron, with your SaskTech group, in that, as we all are seeing, the ecosystem is doing amazing things, but a divergence from the good that the ecosystem is seeing is access to human capital. And this is going to become a very, very big problem. It's already a problem. And it is, it's kind of the underbelly that we like to promote the ecosystem, and it's amazing, but it's a blessing and a curse when it comes to human capital, because access to talent is required to fuel the engine, yet, it's going to be harder and harder to come by. And, capital is great to try to offset that and bring more in, but we need to be promoting this, as you said, Aaron, from elementary school on, because this is a problem that we hope to have forever, right? I mean, we want to continue to grow. So,
yeah. It's an I will reassure you that it's obviously top of mind for a lot of people. I have many conversations every week about how we shift things, and we will this fall actually have quite a few very interesting things to announce. There's going to be a fantastic announcement out of Sask Poly that I think will make a really big difference to all of us. We're going to see a really interesting announcement, I think, from immigration and career training in the coming months as well, about some new channels and opportunities to be able to bring people into the country. We're continuing to have a rolling conversation with government and post-secondaries and K-12 stakeholders on how to do this. And of course, everyone is welcome to participate in those conversations. Indeed, we need your voice. Every time that somebody stands up and says that in a public forum or in a letter to a minister or on Twitter, you push the agenda forward, you lend greater weight to those of us who are having those conversations. And so it's very much appreciated. Kirk, what could be built that would take you from this reorganized, redirected, lean organization that you're pulling out of the pandemic from a screeching 90-degree turn and launching it with all of the momentum that you need into the next few years?
So is that an ecosystem question?
Sure. What could we build and help with?
Yeah,
from the whole community. Yeah.
Yeah, I think oh man, the light keeps turning off on me. Is this a good look?
You actually kind of look good like that, honestly.
Yeah. I look better in the dark.
Yeah, just saying, like a black car.
There we go. I think I kind of echo what Kyle said a little bit. I think that the talent, the technical talent, I think there's something that I've always thought there's a huge opportunity, I think, in terms of the connection of the non-technical founders, entrepreneurs who have ideas, industry connection, they have insight into problems and connecting those with entrepreneurial minded technical folks. I think this panel is a good example of people who've done that or are kind of finding their way with that, and in terms of being able to build team and find people that have that other piece. I think there's so many opportunities that I've always thought this. I used to work with economic development in Regina, and I talked about this all the time. I just think these types of events, these types of kind of public dialogue are so good in terms of making connections and bringing people together, because I think there's so much opportunity and innovation that could be created if that kind of mix of people can be brought together. So again, I think there's probably no shortage of people with great ideas, great connections, great industry knowledge. But how do you actually kind of translate that into high growth tech opportunities? I don't think we've figured that out yet. I think the exposure of the technology sector and promoting that there are opportunities and there are success stories will go a long way. But I think the more we can do to kind of connect the right people together to kind of bring more ideas to and it's been incredible, I think, with collabs and Cultivator in terms of some of the early stage programming that a lot of companies that are well on their way to success have started from is a good example of that. But I think there's more to do.
Cool. I really appreciate the shout out to EDR there. I think that Economic Development Regina has been doing a lot of heavy lifting. They invested significantly a few years ago, and the addition of Tina Baudry-Meller to the file has done nothing but good. We were sorry to lose her as a minister, but in fact, I suspect that she's having as much or more impact in her current role than she did as minister. So I'm excited to see what's happening out of there. It's definitely driving things forward. Rachel, I know you're there. thinking, oh, well, I've got so much to do still. I can't imagine what else I need. But is there something that you're worrying about now that you think might not be there ready for you?
Maybe not necessarily specifically me, but just more broadly speaking, I think we need to just continue encouraging more women entrepreneurs. As we all know, there's such a gap there. And so, there's still so few women entrepreneurs, and I've had the fortune of, connecting with a lot of them and building really great relationships. But I think that that's something that I would still like to see being a topic of conversation, and hopefully encouraging more women to step into entrepreneurship and take these leadership roles and to try to bridge that gap that we have. So that's really something that I hope doesn't just fizzle out, and that we can continue to think about and talk about and encourage women to take on leadership roles in companies.
Thank you. And it would certainly be nice if it weren't a woman bringing it up on the panel now, wouldn't it? You've called out WESC a couple of times, and so has Katrina, and certainly they are doing also a fair amount of heavy lifting, real reinvention in the last couple of years in terms of the programming directed towards the innovation industry. And it's really nice to see the engagement there. And there's been some money from Innovation Saskatchewan to support those efforts coming out over the next couple of years. So I think we're going to continue to see that, but it's not a job that should be limited to WESC or to Innovation Saskatchewan. It is a community challenge. And so we owe it to each other to make sure that we're bringing forward women in the communities, but also doing our best to reach out and find women and encourage them to enter the space as much as possible. So thank you very much for pointing that out. I think it should not have gotten lost in here. Katrina, last question to you, and I'm already getting the cane. I've got Amy saying, we're over time and whatever, but I've negotiated successfully to allow you to say a few words. Same question to you. I mean, you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly over the last while. What do you see coming out that you're going to need that isn't there?
I love Rachel's point. Women are 6% of technology founders. So taking that further is going to be so important, and continuing to have that funding and actually making those changes in policies and initiatives to actually push those things forward, I think are going to be really effective. I also would just like to expand it even further to people of color and all sorts of diversity and inclusion type policies that should be out there, because technology is shaping the future. All people should be involved in shaping that future. And so I think, we're in a great position in Saskatchewan because we're a small, nimble group who are all dedicated to making things better. We can actually be an example in the country of making things a lot more diverse and kind of lead the way in that way. So that's sort of my last statement is that we need definitely more women and more diversity in the group, and also just people just supporting each other in general, like maintaining the same relationship as we grow, ensuring that the community has the same level of I need help, here's someone to help you, and making sure that we're always continuously mentoring each other and raising each other, because all boats float together. What's that phrase?
Rising tide floats all boats.
Thank you. Rising tide floats all boats. And, we have that in Saskatchewan, and we have the perfect opportunity to be leaders in the country in all sorts of areas.
It's interesting, isn't it? When you are trying to expand something and you look at the demographics of it, and then you lift up the underrepresented groups towards represented levels, lo and behold, you've expanded it. If we had represented a number of women in our technical jobs in tech industries, we wouldn't have a labor shortage. If we had a represented number of First Nations MAT, we wouldn't have a labor shortage. It's that difference. So we could just go out and solve that specific problem, and we would solve a massive problem for our whole industry. So it's very much worth putting that energy in. One thing before I let the moderator drop back in, and my apologies, but I think it's really important to consider that this doesn't magically happen. We don't reach out there and pull someone into a senior position or into an entrepreneurship position as a founder. It takes a lot of training and energy. And so companies like mine in particular, the large scaled companies or scaling companies, can have an outsized difference on the ecosystem by proactively hiring and making sure that we're really doing even more than our part in terms of pulling in to underrepresented communities and making sure that those people are trained and enabled and welcomed then into the community by and large. Because it's those people who get a background, even working for a boring old slow multinational like Siemens, that will end up then going out and starting the next company and becoming that next female founder or next BIPOC founder. And so, I guess a general call out to the community of listeners, if you're working in a larger company, this is our job and we need to own it. Thank you very much, all of the panelists. It's been an absolute joy getting to know you and finding your stories a little bit more, and encouraging that I think that even in a challenging pandemic time, we're still able to found companies and to reinvent them to make them thrive, and that we seem to be on the right direction in our community as much as possible for having a growing ecosystem. And I can't really wait to find out what happens next. Thank you, Amy, for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much. My least favorite part about my job is being a time cop. I could have let this dialogue go all day. I promise I didn't want to do it. We could have sat here until midnight, I'm sure. But thank you so much to the panelists, to Aaron. What a fantastic conversation just around the peaks and the valleys that the startup world brings. We've been talking a little bit around here about the dangers of toxic optimism. So I think it also is important to highlight some of those valleys that are inherently just part of the journey. But I think it is safe to say that after a year of those unknowns and those pivots, Saskatchewan still truly is an amazing place to start, grow, and scale a technology company with hopefully more to come in terms of supports and offerings. Thank you to everybody in the audience. Please be sure to head to Attendee Hub to tune into that startup social kicking off tonight at 7 p.m. Seeing SK Tech in action. It's going to be pretty amazing, so you don't want to miss it. And with that, everybody have a fantastic night, and we will see you tomorrow for the panel action.
Thank you.